Welcome back to another NXT review with me, Mr. Park, and on behalf of the British Fist. If you have any thoughts on this show, please comment in the comment section down below. And in the description box, you'll find the usual two links I put in there, a link to this week's show, and of course, a link to Brandon Stroud's Best and Worst of NXT column, which I recommend you guys check out. I think it is one of the most interesting wrestling columns, in my opinion, on the internet. You know, reviewing the show and looking at the best and worst of a show, which I believe is still the best show on TV right now in terms of wrestling. Let's get to this review then. You know, I've come on here quite a lot of the time saying that NXT, in my opinion, is a better show than Raw and SmackDown, and I stick by that, but I can understand why, you know, Raw and SmackDown maybe is not as good as NXT in the sense that with NXT, it's a developmental show, and they can mix and match things, they can try stuff out. It's essentially trying to find the right gimmick for the right person to get them over in the right way, and they can take chances. They don't have ratings or anything like Raw and SmackDown. They don't have shareholders to satisfy like, you know, the Raw and SmackDown shows do. And I can understand why NXT comes off a little bit better because it's only an hour long, and why Raw and SmackDown really don't. Because like Raw and SmackDown, like I said, they have to, you know, they're the main sources of advertising revenue for WWE, and they can't really take as many chances on the show because of the, you know, Nielsen ratings and the USA Network and Sci-Fi, etc. So I understand why NXT comes off a little bit better, you know, from a wrestling perspective, from a wrestling fan perspective, such as myself. But, you know, one thing that NXT doesn't have right now, in my opinion, that WWE and Raw and SmackDown do have, is a tag team division. You know, NXT, when they brought the tag team championships in, they had like the Wyatt family, you know, and they had, you know, Bo Dallas and Adrian Neville, or Adrian Neville and Oliver Gray. They were the only real tag teams that I remember. And now the tag team division is really dire. I mean, you've got the Ascension, who are a really good tag team, in my opinion. But the only trouble is, they've really got no viable opponents. I mean, you look at this week, Hunico and Camacho as a babyface tag team going up against the Ascension. I'm supposed to buy these guys are going to beat the Ascension. You know, with barely any build, they've won a couple of squash matches, beat the Ascension with a roll-up, and they lost to them in another match, I believe, for the tag team championships, and they got another one out of nowhere. And, you know, this match wasn't even pre-announced or anything. I mean, WWE, NXT, you've got 3 belts on this show. Try and at least make title defenses feel important rather than just throwing them out there. Pre-announce the match. Maybe give this match a video package or just something to remind us that it's an important match, because to me, it was just start of the show, oh, this match is for the NXT Tag Team Championships, this team versus this team. Well, this doesn't feel important. You know, and again, it's mostly about setup. I mean, this wasn't really set up in a way which I could really get behind. I mean, yes, they had, you know, Hunico and Macho defeat some jobbers, and then they just like quick-fired them to the Tag Team Championship scene, and that's not really the right way to go, in my opinion. But to be honest with you, at the end of the day, I really have no interest in this feud anyway, so I don't really know why I'm moaning. But at least I can see NXT's tag team division is dire. They desperately need some new tag teams. I'm not a massive fan of Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, but apparently they've got them coming into workouts to work some matches from NXT. They'll do for now. But the WWE Raw and SmackDown tag team division is definitely a lot more exciting than NXT right now. And as for this match, like I said, I wasn't really interested in it. The Ascension get the victory in a match which was probably too short, really, to be a championship match. But that was really a theme of the evening, in my opinion. So we had Alexander Rusev versus Cassius Ohno. Now, this was set up in a segment, I believe it was last week, when Cassius Ohno was facing Tyler Breeze, or was it 2 weeks ago, and Rusev attacked him from behind. And they kind of built this up with a backstage segment in the last show. So this match did make sense in some way. And, you know, my first question I have is, what have they done with Rusev's wooden board with the victim's name on it? I really like that, because it kind of, you know, apart from his style and his look and, you know, his gimmick, it set him out from a lot of other people, because he's the only one that has a board with his victim's name on it and smashes it over his head. You know, it's those kind of things that can really help a gimmick get over. But really, at the end of the day, if I look at this segment for what it was essentially a squash match to assert Rusev's dominance at the expense of Cassius Ohno, who is on his way out, you know, because he's not favoured by WWE officials, which we won't go into here because we all know what happened and we all have our opinions. So all I can say is rest in peace, Cassius Ohno, and good luck to Chris Hero on his travels and on the independent circuit. Could have been a great talent in WWE, but when you don't do what the authority tells you to do, you're going to get knocked down. You know, speaking of setting up a match, I mean, you had a segment where the commentators just talked about what Cesaro had been doing to Byron Saxton over the last 2 weeks and showed video footage, and then they had Regal's reaction. And Regal sold this whole thing brilliantly. You know, quite clearly he knows Cesaro is an intimidating opponent, and he doesn't want anything to do with him. Regal just just sells it fantastically, in my opinion. And, you know, even though I think the build to this feud hasn't been that great, at least they've been doing a good job in finding different ways to set this match up each and every week. You've got Regal on the commentary table. You don't really have to do too much with these guys. They don't have to be involved in matches. You don't really have to do too much post-match stuff. It's very simple setup every week in a different way to set up what could be a very good match, in my opinion, for NXT. And can definitely will main event an NXT show. Probably not the 200th edition, though. We had Divas Tag Team action on this show, and while I do not give two shits about the Divas division in WWE, I really care about the Divas division in NXT, or the Women's division, as I'm going to call it. I think it's one of the biggest things for me to care about sometimes about the NXT show. I mean, you look at this week, you've got the whole storyline with Bayley and Summer Rae and Sasha Banks and Charlotte. Yes, Charlotte wasn't on this show, but this tag match they had was set up very well. I mean, you had a backstage segment where Summer Rae and Sasha Banks was picking on Bayley, you know, to do with Charlotte, and then Bayley said she was going to get a partner. They had the backstage segment before the match where they set up Bayley's partner, which turned out to be Natalya. And, you know, the match itself, it was, you know, I was expecting this to go a little bit longer, in my opinion. You know, you had the whole thing with Natalya's head going into the turnbuckle and kind of like knocking her out a little bit, and Sasha Banks pins Bayley, which I believe is essential because Summer Rae has already been established as a kind of like a heel now, and you really need to do your best to try and get Sasha over by giving her wins such as that one over Bayley. So, again, it's another example of simple setup over time, and even though the match really wasn't as good as it should have been, it still did a good job in telling the story that it was supposed to. The best baby faces are essentially baby faces that you cannot hate, and I think Bayley really does fall into that category, even though I really wasn't a massive fan of Bayley, you know, let's say 6 months ago. She's really growing into this very, you know, very good character in the sense that you really can't hate her all that much. She's just so cute and cuddly, and there's no way you could hate Bayley. It kind of reminds me of Joseph Park. You just couldn't hate Joseph Park because he just was so innocent, and those are the best kind of babyface characters. One that you can't say a bad word to. You can only cheer and feel sympathy for. So in this next segment, we had Mojo Rawley versus Scott's No One Gives a Shit About Me, Dawson. And this segment, again, it was set up from last week with the backstage segment, and even though the shenanigans between them two was a bit it's still some setup to get to a match, which is more than you get on Raw and SmackDown sometimes, I'll just say that. This segment was pretty much all about getting Mojo Rawley over, which is essential because, in my opinion, Mojo Rawley is one of the hottest baby faces in NXT right now. He's only just come in, and considering he's only just come in as this stay hyped character, it's important this character gets over. And, you know, putting him in these like little mini feuds where he's going to get wins over guys like Scott Dawson, who, let's face it, no one really cares about, but they're going to boo him because they're going to cheer Mojo Rawley. You know, and Mojo Rawley has gotten very over. And, you know, these kind of things are so easy to book. I mean, you have the heel beat down Mojo Rawley. You have Mojo Rawley come back. You have him win. You know, these kind of things are very simple to do, and it seems like these simple things NXT does very right. And then you have the following post-match beatdown, which will give the feud, you know, a reason to continue onwards, maybe to another match where Mojo Rawley gets another win and, you know, finishes that feud off. You know, I don't know. But another segment, which, again, it's just simple to book. I mean, it's not like ratings segments, but they're just simple segments to book, which you can't really have any complaints about. So next week, we're going to have the 200th episode of NXT, which, to be honest with you, I thought they would have built this up a little bit more. I thought they would have done a little bit more to hype up, you know, maybe 2 or 3 big angles on that show. They, you know, gave us some stuff this week to look forward to. They have the Open Challenge with the Ascension to look forward to next week, which I'm guessing that's where Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards make their appearance on NXT. We got Bo Dallas versus Adrian Neville in a lumberjack match, you know. They had that match 2 weeks ago, and we haven't really heard anything or seen anything from them from that point onwards, so this is a bit strange. They're just throwing this match out there. I guess it's like the rematch, as that match didn't have a clean, decisive finish, so I guess that would be a way to sort of end that feud. You know, it's being the 200th episode. Do you think Adrian Neville could win? Don't know, just saying. And we have the appearance from Triple H, which, even though there is an NXT Championship match, will no doubt be the main event because, well, let's face it, Triple H, whatever show he's on, he's always the main event. Because that's what's best for business. So now it's time for me to talk about the main event segment from this week's NXT show, which involved Kruger facing Sami Zayn. You know, this is, in my opinion, a nice little side feud for Sami Zayn while he's not feuding fully with Bo Dallas for the NXT Championship, which is exactly what Adrian Neville is doing right now. And again, you know, it's all about the setup. I mean, you look at such storytelling aspects like Zayn getting the fluke win over Leo Kruger in the Beat the Clock challenge, preventing him from getting that #1 contendership. Cesaro using Kruger to take out Sami Zayn by saying that if he does take him out and beat him, etc., he can join the Real Americans. So you've got all this stuff going in there involving multiple characters and multiple layers of the storytelling, and they did a good job on this NXT show of giving us another layer to this story involving Leo Kruger and Sami Zayn. It's essentially a blood feud. It's not over any titles or anything. It's essentially a blood feud. I think this is something Brandon Stroud also picked up on his NXT column, which, again, I recommend you check out. I guess the only issue I had here was the match. It was another short match. I believe it only got 5 or 6 minutes. I think 5 minutes, which generally in the main event of an NXT show in a feud that you built up like this, you'd think you would have gone at least 10 minutes, to establish the storytelling aspect, to establish the psychology, just to establish, all the points in the match that you generally want to get to, like the hope spot, them two getting tired, etc. So I was very surprised here that this went very short, as it really, in my opinion, affected the strength of the storytelling and psychology in this match, as it just seemed very rushed. I was very surprised also when Leo Kruger got the win. I really didn't expect Kruger to get the win here, so WWE and NXT actually legitimately surprised me here by having Leo Kruger get the win. If these two are going to feud, I think Kruger at some point had to get some kind of win over Sami Zayn, so it felt like Sami Zayn was overcoming the heel, which is exactly what you want to establish early on in a feud, which you rarely see Raw or Smackdown do. Let's put it that way. Unless it's a 3-on-1 attack or something. But the post-match was quite interesting as well. I think the post-match did a good job of, giving another layer to the storyline in the sense that they established a lot of hate between the two. You had Sami Zayn diving out to Leo Kruger after the post-match attack that Kruger gave him. Referees separate them, and, like I said, now they've got established hate between the two. And once again, it was just really simple, but it was all about the setting up to that aspect of the storytelling aspect of this match, which then takes us on to the next layer of storyline. It's just really simple, and it just goes to show it just needs some thought, or just needs some detail, or just needs some, writing or delegation in order to actually do that, because NXT can seem to do it so simply, where Raw and SmackDown really can't. And also NXT can make me care about characters a lot more than Raw and SmackDown, but we won't go into that here. So I thought this was even though the match was short, in what it was designed to do, it really established hatred between the two, which is a good thing for this feud, in my opinion. It'll probably carry on for another month or so. And then maybe Sami Zayn at this point will get back into the title picture, and that's maybe where he'll get his big win. And think how much better it'll feel with Sami Zayn actually having to overcome all these obstacles and actually finally getting to the point, after maybe a year or so being on the roster, where he actually can hold the belt up and actually win that belt and take that moment in. Imagine how much better it'll feel and how much more emotionally invested you'll be in that one moment as a fan, with all these obstacles being placed in front of Sami Zayn, than what you would have been if, let's say, you won the belt 6 months ago. There is such thing as building up to moments like these and actually creating, a moment which people will remember, such as, Chris Benoit at WrestleMania 20 and other moments such as that. You see what they do with Daniel Bryan on Raw right now. It's just like they've given him a lot of obstacles to overcome, but it's got to the point now where after a couple of months or so, it seems like he's overcome so many obstacles and he's just never going to get to the point of actually winning the belt. Whereas I don't actually have that feeling with Sami Zayn. I have a feeling with Sami Zayn he's just going to keep going and going and going until he's going to get that belt. Whereas with Daniel Bryan, I guess it's just because of the obvious main event stars WWE have. With Daniel Bryan, you don't really get that feeling that he's actually going to win the belt. He's been screwed so many times now that it's just like, he's kind of like keeps getting knocked down. He's just going to keep getting knocked down for the time being. But hopefully Daniel Bryan will actually win the belt, as that will be a good moment. It's just hasn't got to the point where I guess people have started not to care about Daniel Bryan winning the belt because they've screwed him over so many times. Maybe it's the same case with Sami Zayn. Leave me your thoughts in the comments section on that one. That's a good one, that is. As for this episode of NXT, well, a lot of the matches are very short, and in some cases that was a good thing because it helped establish what the segment was there to do, but in other cases it was a bad thing, as it kind of allowed the matches to be rushed, and the storytelling and psychology aspects really couldn't be as strong as they really should be, considering the strength of the feud. I mean, I wasn't really interested in the opening tag match. The tag team title scene in NXT is just dire, in my opinion. Alexander Rusev as a character, which I think WWE will eventually give a strong push to for the NXT Championship. The Divas segment, again, it was too short, in my opinion, but I do care about a lot of these characters like Bayley and Summer Rae, etc. Mojo Rawley steaming through the roster. Again, we need baby faces. Mojo Rawley is that kind of guy. they at least did some stuff to establish, you know, some stuff that's going on for the 200th episode, even though I feel it should have been built up a lot more. Maybe this should have been like a go-home show addition to this big show. I don't know. And the main event segment, even though the match was too short, but sometimes it's not all about matches, which is why I'm more focusing on the storytelling aspects here. Did a good job in what it was supposed to do with this feud going forward, establishing hate between Leo Kruger and Sami Zayn. It's just a shame that WWE have actually now changed Leo Kruger's gimmick for the future, made him some kind of, I don't really even know. I don't really even know the name, but I know they've changed the gimmick. But anyway, that's my thoughts on NXT. I thought it was a decent show this week. Looking forward to next week's 200th episode. That should be interesting. I'm guessing a lot of people will be marking the fuck out for the American Wolves in NXT. Yeah, we'll see what happens there last week. I hope they get fucking squashed. But anyway, it's been it from me, Mr. Parkin. Thank you very much for watching this review. Goodbye.